There comes a moment, quiet but piercing, when you begin to wonder if your weight is your own, or if it was placed upon you by the spaces you inhabit. You have spent so much time scrutinizing your thoughts, confronting your doubts, dissecting your fears, believing they are the sole source of your suffering. But what if the deeper threat lies not within you, but around you? What if the true erosion of your inner strength begins in the silent corners you return to each day, the conversations you endure without voice, the atmospheres that seem harmless yet slowly drain your spirit? Carl Jung taught us that the psyche is not a self-contained island, it is porous. It breathes in the unseen influences of its surroundings, both external and internal. The human soul is shaped not only by its traumas, memories, and dreams, but by the energetic fields it moves through. Homes, relationships, institutions, even habits of attention. The mind is not only what you think, it is also where you are. You walk into a room and feel your shoulders tense. You sit in a space that should offer rest, yet it breeds unease. You speak with familiar people but leave feeling like a stranger to yourself. And slowly, over time, something intangible within you begins to shift. Your confidence withers, not from self-doubt alone, but from being immersed in energy that keeps you small. Your joy fades, not because you are ungrateful, but because the ground you stand on is emotionally barren. This is not weakness, this is resonance. The soul recognizes when it is not safe to grow. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But fate is not only shaped by childhood wounds or buried memories. It is also shaped by the environments you stop questioning. Some places, both literal and symbolic, hold psychic residue, unspoken rules, invisible hierarchies, emotional suppression. And the longer you stay within them, the more they begin to rewrite your inner story. This is not a call to escape the world, but to see it more clearly. A journey through 7 dangerous places that can quietly unravel your mental strength follows. These are not just physical spaces, but psychological landscapes. Each one carries the potential to distort your clarity, silence your intuition, and separate you from your most authentic self. But when you learn to recognize them, you reclaim the power to choose differently. You remember what it feels like to be rooted in your mind, not lost in the shadows of the world around you. Let us begin. There is a place that feels deceptively safe. It welcomes you with familiarity, comforts you with affirmation, and whispers that you belong. But beneath that comfort lies a quiet danger. This place is the echo chamber, a psychological habitat where every idea, opinion, and worldview reflects your own, not because they are true, but because they are repeated. In such a space, independent thought begins to dissolve. You do not confront yourself, you replicate yourself, and what once felt like belonging soon becomes a subtle imprisonment. Carl Jung warned us of the shadow hidden within collective thinking. He believed that the soul begins to shrink when a person loses the courage to think for themselves. Growth depends on tension, countering the unfamiliar and wrestling with contradiction. But in the echo chamber, contradiction is exiled. Every voice agrees. Every belief is mirrored. Slowly, curiosity dies, not because it is killed, but because it is never fed. Think about your daily life, the media you consume, the conversations you keep, the communities you seek. Do they challenge you or comfort you? Do they deepen your vision or merely affirm your past? Jung saw the psyche as a living organism. Like the body, it must stretch and adapt, or it atrophies. But the echo chamber keeps the soul in a loop, recycling the same language, fears, and unquestioned truths. In time, what was once an opinion hardens into dogma, and with dogma comes fragility, because anything unfamiliar now feels dangerous. This environment does not exist only online. It can be found in a tightly knit circle of friends, where disagreement feels like betrayal. It can live in a workplace where silence is safer than dissent. It can arise in a family where love is conditional on compliance. In these spaces, people stop evolving not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack disruption. And without disruption, the inner world remains flat. Jung once said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But that kind of transformation requires mirrors that do not flatter, voices that do not echo. True mental strength is forged in discomfort, the willingness to be wrong, unlearn, and begin again. If your reality is never questioned, it becomes a cage. The bars are invisible, but their effect is real. They limit who you are allowed to become. So ask yourself, when was the last time a conversation changed your mind? When did you last feel stretched instead of reassured? The echo chamber feels like a haven, but slowly robs you of the inner friction needed to grow. To step out of it is not an act of defiance. It is a return to the aliveness of your thinking. We enter a subtle battlefield not with weapons, but with glances, numbers, and silent insecurities. It is the place where the soul begins to shrink under the weight of someone else's spotlight. The comparison arena. This psychological arena seduces us with the illusion of ambition, but quietly suffocates us with despair. In this space, the self is not measured by its evolution, but by proximity to others' victories. A promotion, a vacation, a body, a relationship, all become silent judges of your worth. And so begins the inner erosion. You do not grow from within, you chase from without. Carl Jung taught that the actual task of the individual is individuation, the journey toward becoming who you were meant to be, not who the world conditioned you to be. But the comparison arena turns this sacred process into a race. You find yourself running toward goals that never belong to you. You mistake loudness for success and applause for purpose. You scroll past curated lives and begin to question your reality. You adjust your desires to fit the molds that others display, and slowly, your soul forgets what it once longed for. Have you ever reached a milestone only to feel an emptiness where celebration should be? That is the echo of a life not thoroughly chosen. The comparison arena replaces inner truth with external benchmarks. Your depth becomes invisible. Your pace feels inadequate. You no longer ask, "What brings me to life?" but rather, "Why am I not more like them?" In Jungian thought, this is not just a distraction, but a psychological split. You fragment yourself, trying to fit into borrowed identities, sacrificing your essence for approval that will never be enough. And here lies the danger. The longer you stay in this arena, the harder it becomes to hear your voice. The compass within begins to spin without direction. You are pulled further from your soul and deeper into performance. But comparison is a thief of more than joy. It is a thief of identity. To be mentally strong is to reclaim your original questions. What do I value? What do I desire outside of validation? What if the life I envy is not aligned with the one I'm meant to live? Real strength does not come from standing tallest in the crowd. It comes from stepping outside the crowd entirely and remembering your ground. It is one thing to escape the arena of comparison, but another entirely to step into the next subtle trap. The masked circle. This is not a place that demands you to outperform others. Instead, it invites you to abandon yourself in quieter, more insidious ways. Here, the danger lies not in competition, but in concealment. The atmosphere is where smiles are worn like armor, laughter is rehearsed, and the soul speaks in whispers because the room has no ears for truth. The masked circle is any environment that requires you to fragment who you are for the sake of belonging. And at first it feels harmless, even necessary. Carl Jung described this mask as the persona, the part of our psyche we craft to be accepted in society. He understood its function. It helps us survive in a world that often rewards appearances over authenticity. But he also warned us of its danger. When you forget that the persona is a mask, you begin to believe it is you. Slowly, you replace your inner voice with the script that pleases others. You become a reflection of expectations instead of a mirror to your truth. Think of the spaces where you withhold your real feelings just to keep the peace, where you suppress your opinions to avoid disapproval, where your silence is not peace but fear in disguise. This is the masked circle. It might be your office, your circle of friends, or even your family table. It is any space where authenticity becomes a liability and conformity feels like safety. Although you may smile on the outside, the body knows the truth. You walk away from these encounters not just tired, but emptied, because pretending costs energy, and denying your truth drains the spirit. Over time, the mask no longer protects you, it imprisons you. The longer you wear it, the more your authentic self retreats into the unconscious. You forget what you love, what angers you, what makes you feel alive. You become emotionally invisible to yourself. And worst of all, you may begin to believe that who you truly are is unworthy of being seen. Jung taught that real mental strength does not come from perfection, it comes from integration. The brave act of acknowledging the parts of yourself you were once taught to hide. The shadow, in Jungian language, is not evil. It is simply the part of you that was silenced. And when you reclaim it, you start to remember who you are beyond performance. Ask yourself this: who are you when no one is watching? Who would you be if you stopped performing? Healing begins when you remove the mask, not just from your face, but also from your identity. Because you were never meant to be a role, you were meant to be whole. Sometimes, the most eroding places are not loud, chaotic, or visibly hostile. They are quiet, predictable, familiar. The silent home. It is where nothing is explicitly wrong, yet something essential is missing. A home where the furniture is in place, the calendar is complete, and the smiles are polite. But no one says what they truly feel. Love exists, but it lives beneath the surface, implied rather than spoken. Affection is shown through routine, not through warmth. And over time, what looks like peace is the slow burial of the emotional self. Carl Jung believed that the emotional climate of our earliest environments molds the psyche. In homes where silence takes the place of connection, children learn that feeling intensely is dangerous, and expressing it is even worse. So they learn to hold it in, to suppress the rage, the grief, the longing, not because they want to, but because they must to be accepted, or simply not to disrupt the fragile calm, and this adaptation becomes survival. However, coping is not the same as healing. In the silent home, emotional expression is not encouraged. It is avoided. You might recall moments where your tears were met with discomfort, your voice with dismissal, or your truth with distance. So you adapt. You learn to shrink your needs. You master the performance of okay. You smile while your chest tightens. You speak about the weather when your soul is aching. And no one notices, because this is how it has always been done. But the psyche does not forget. The feelings you push down do not dissolve. They wait, they gather, and one day they spill. Through anxiety, through depression, through sudden anger or fatigue you cannot explain. Jung warned us that what remains unconscious eventually becomes fate. The silence you learned to survive becomes the silence that slowly rewrites your inner world. To live in a home that looks safe but feels emotionally barren is to be surrounded by presence but starved of connection. And that contradiction is exhausting. It fractures the self. Because even if you appear strong, Your strength is hollow without the permission to feel. Mental resilience is not born from emotional suppression. It is born from integration, from the willingness to name what hurts, to sit with what is real, and to be witnessed in it. So ask yourself, when was the last time you felt deeply heard without raising your voice? When was the last time your inner truth was met not with correction or silence, but with compassion? Healing begins there, not in the volume of your expression, but in the space where it can exist. There is a place that does not appear threatening at first glance. It moves quickly, feels productive, and is often praised by the world for its momentum. But beneath the surface, it is hollow. It is called the chaotic space. This environment is where the noise never stops, and the soul is never still. A place where your senses are constantly hijacked and your attention is torn into fragments. The outer world demands more, louder, faster, and without noticing, you begin to equate motion with meaning. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." Yet in the chaotic space there is no room to look within. You are too busy chasing, too distracted to question what you are chasing. It begins with small compromises. The phone never leaves your hand, your calendar leaves no room to breathe. You scroll while you eat, you respond while you feel, and little by little, your inner voice dims beneath the avalanche of notifications, noise, and obligations. Not because it is weak, but because you have forgotten how to listen. And here lies the danger. Stillness, which should be healing, begins to feel like a threat. Silence becomes unbearable. Rest triggers guilt. You fill your day with tasks not because they matter, but because the absence of movement would force you to feel. And buried beneath the busyness is often something you do not want to face. Grief, confusion, disillusionment, or truth. The chaotic space helps you avoid it all, until avoidance becomes your way of life. But the psyche, Jung taught, needs rhythm. Just as the body requires sleep to regenerate, the mind requires quiet to recalibrate. Without it, you begin to feel scattered. Your thoughts on losing weight. You start many things, but finish few. And the more profound tragedy is that the more chaotic your world becomes, the more alien your inner life feels. You may catch glimpses of yourself in moments of fatigue or during late-night solitude, but they pass quickly, drowned again by the morning's noise. The chaotic space is seductive because it feels alive, but aliveness is not speed. It is present, and presence requires depth. Jung believed that meaning does not arrive when we move faster, but when we move inward. The question then becomes, if the noise suddenly ceased, if the world around you fell quiet, would you know who you are? Beneath the urgency. You were not made to be constantly reachable. You were not made to live on the surface of your own life. To stay mentally strong, you must make room for stillness, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. In silence, your soul returns to you. There is a place more haunting than any room, more dangerous than any outer landscape. It is not built of walls, but of silence. It is called the abandoned self. This is not a place you consciously enter. It is shaped by omission, by small betrayals you commit against yourself in the name of peace, approval, or survival. You do not wake up one day and decide to abandon yourself. It happens quietly. You say yes when your body says no. You laugh when your soul feels heavy. You stay when every part of you longs to leave. And slowly, piece by piece, you move away from your inner truth. Carl Jung taught that within the unconscious lies everything we repress, deny, or disown. These forgotten parts do not vanish. They do not politely wait. They rebel. They rise in the form of anxiety, unexplained sadness, inner restlessness, or the quiet ache of meaninglessness. When you lose connection to your instincts, your emotions whisper and then shout. They do not do this to harm you, but to remind you that something vital has been exiled, your voice. You may call it responsibility. You may dress it in adult language like duty or sacrifice. You might even be praised for how well you cope, how much you give, how little you ask. But make no mistake, coping is not the same as living. And self-abandonment is not maturity. It is forgetting your center in favor of roles you were told to play, the caretaker, the achiever, the peacekeeper. And while the world may reward your adaptation, your soul begins to grieve. Have you ever looked in the mirror without recognizing the person staring back? Have you ever felt like a visitor in your own life, surrounded by people, roles, and rhythms that no longer reflect who you are? That is the shadow of the abandoned self. You begin to feel homesick, not for a place, but for a part of you that went silent long ago. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming truly oneself, requires the courage to re-inhabit that silence, to listen again, to reclaim the voice that once guided you before it was talked over by fear, conformity, or guilt. The tragedy is not that we abandon ourselves, it is that we do so for so long that we forget there was ever an alternative. But there is. The path back is not loud. It does not demand performance. It begins in quiet moments when you say no and mean it. Rest without apology, cry without shame, and choose your truth, even if no one else understands it. So ask yourself not what the world wants from you, but what your soul needs from you. That is where the journey begins. Not by becoming more, but by returning to what was never truly lost, only left behind. There is a place within you that no one sees. A room without windows and light was sealed by fear and silence. It is not part of the world you show others, perhaps not even yourself. This is the forbidden room. It is the psychic space where shame lives. Buried memories lie wrapped in silence, and old grief, unresolved anger, and forgotten versions of you remain untouched. You do not speak of this room because opening the door feels dangerous. But what you suppress does not dissolve. It waits, it watches, and eventually it begins to shape your life from the shadows. Carl Jung called this the realm of the shadow, the parts of the self we exile because they do not fit the image we want to project. These aspects we deem too ugly, vulnerable, or unacceptable. But the unconscious does not forget what the conscious mind rejects. Instead, it speaks through projection, emotional outbursts, and the haunting repetition of patterns we do not understand. Have you ever erupted in rage that felt disproportionate to the situation? Or chosen partners, careers, or habits that mirror wounds you thought were long behind you? That is not a coincidence. That is the forbidden room reaching into your present. This is the space that makes us uncomfortable when we sit in silence. The place that speaks in our dreams, fears, and moments when our inner voice trembles. Many spend their entire lives circling the door without touching the handle. They build a life to avoid it, filling time, chasing noise, perfecting appearances. But Jung warned that whatever you refuse to confront will eventually become your master. The shadow unacknowledged is the saboteur behind the curtain. It influences decisions, poisons relationships, and limits growth. Avoidance feels safe, but it is a prison. The real danger is not what is inside the forbidden room, but how it rules you when you pretend it is not there. Jung believed that healing is not about erasing the past, but integrating it, bringing the fragments of the self back into wholeness. This work is not glamorous, it is raw and often painful, but it is also liberating. One truth at a time, you begin to reclaim the energy bound in repression. You become familiar with your darkness, not to dwell there, but to stop fearing it. So, gently but honestly ask yourself, what memories have you locked away? What parts of yourself still live behind that door? And if you dared to enter, not to punish yourself, but to retrieve what was lost, what kind of freedom might you find on the other side? Now that you have walked through these 7 outer and inner landscapes, perhaps you recognize more than one as familiar terrain. Maybe you have dwelled in the echo chamber, surrounded by voices that only mirrored your own, wondering why your soul still felt silent. Perhaps you have sat inside the quiet home, where words were scarce and connection was buried beneath routine, yearning for someone to ask how you genuinely feel. Or maybe you have stood outside the forbidden room, hand on the door, terrified to open it and face what you once locked away in fear. Carl Jung taught that healing does not begin with heroism. It starts with the willingness to see clearly, to name what was once hidden, to hold a light to the patterns we have walked through blindly, and to ask ourselves, with radical honesty, is this where I belong? You do not need to abandon the world to protect your mind, but you must become a conscious steward of your energy. That means choosing wisely the places you enter, the conversations you entertain, the atmospheres you absorb, and the stories you continue to live inside. Mental strength is not found in the illusion of having it all figured out. It is found in the quiet, often uncomfortable courage to leave what diminishes you, even if it once felt safe, even if it still feels familiar. Because the psyche, like the soul, cannot evolve in captivity. It must breathe truthfully, stretch through discomfort, and find rhythm beyond routine. So I invite you to pause, reflect. Which of these places have you lingered in too long? What internal rooms have you tiptoed around, afraid of what they might say? And most importantly, what would it take, not just in thought, but in action, for you to step away from what drains you and toward what restores you? Jung believed that awareness is the first act of liberation. When you see clearly, you begin to choose differently, and it is in those choices, not grand gestures, but daily, conscious steps, that strength is forged. Your mind does not need more noise, it needs intention. Your spirit does not need more speed, it requires stillness and truth. So speak, if this stirred something in you. Share your reflection. Your voice may be the mirror someone else has long been waiting for. And remember, the path to wholeness is not walked in comfort. It is a bold decision to stop abandoning yourself and start honoring the places your soul has outgrown. Because strength is not perfection, it is the courage to change direction. If this message stirred something inside you, don't stop here. The next video will take you even deeper into the journey of healing, growth, and self-discovery. It might just be the breakthrough your soul has been waiting for. Tap into it now. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join a community committed to truth, transformation, and real inner change. You're not alone on this path. I'll meet you in the next video, where we continue becoming who we were always meant to be.